Okay, back to where we left off. The last thing we were discussing last week was number one, that the melacha that you do on Shabbos has to be like for most things, not everything. It has to be what's called miskayim. It has to be permanent. Like we learned, if you write on a dirty car window, you write two words, wash me or something like that. So then it's not called you shouldn't do it, but it's not biblically forbidden because it's not permanent writing. If you write with a pencil, things like that. It's the same thing sometimes when you make a knot. You're not allowed to make a knot. One of the malacha is kosher. Kosher means making knots. So but the biblical knot is when the knot is permanent. For instance, a knot that you're planning to take out, like say you tie your shoe, right? So you're planning to undo it. So even though you're tying, it's not called the permanent knot, where you make your tie, right? You make a knot. So even though you're making a knot, but because it's not made for a permanent thing, so then halachically it's not forbidden. If the knot, many poskim say, is going to last more than 24 hours, we'll learn when we get to those melachos. But the bottom line is it needs to be a permanent thing, not by every type of melacha. Like it says, it doesn't apply by planting, plowing, shechting, what? Some what?
You have a ring suit or something.
Yeah.
And use a safety pin. Can you do that?
Okay, that's not really where we're up to, but you ask the question, I'll answer it. Part of the malacha, that's a different malacha. That's the malacha called toifer, sewing. Now the question is a safety pin called sewing? Then it's also a question, sometimes you put a safety pin in one side and out the other. Sometimes you do it within the same side twice.
Right.
So that's also a difference, because when you just put it in, I don't have a safety pin to show, but if you put it in one side here, one side there, right? That's not sewing at all. But according to many opinions, not everybody, according to some opinions, if you put it in and out on the same side, that it should hold firmly. Some opinions say it's sewing. Some opinions say a safety pin is not considered sewing. Okay? Just like I'll give you another example. You have a zipper. On your pants, you have a zipper. Or you have a jacket with a zipper, right? Now, if you think about it, a zipper is sewing. What does the zipper do? There's two separate pieces, and then you sew it together with the zipper. So what? What do you need the third element? You have the zipper, and you're sewing two pieces together. So obviously that's allowed on Shabbos. Why is it allowed on Shabbos? Because that's the normal way of doing it. Nobody says when they pull up the zipper, I just sewed my pants. Because it's made to open and close. Just like you're not to do construction on Shabbos, correct? If somebody takes a folding table that's closed, and they open a folding table, that's not called construction on Shabbos. Why isn't it called construction? Because the table is made to fold up and then to take out. If you do more of a permanent thing that's not made to do it, and you construct something, so then that would be an issue. Understand? So sewing, it depends. If somebody, basically you could use a safety pin on Shabbos. The only question is, can you go in and out? That some people permit, some people forbid, and then the other way is definitely permitted. Safety pin? No. Well, it's what's called keli shemalachte le'isr. When we learn muktzah, we'll learn. It's a vessel, it's an object that's primary use is to do something forbidden. Sewing. So if you're allowed to use a safety pin on Shabbos, then it's not a question. But even if not, it's a thing which is made for sewing. So you're not allowed to move it on Shabbos unless if you want to do something permissible with it, or you need the place where the object is on. Instead, it's like a hammer. A hammer is primary use of a hammer is to do construction. Right? Now construction is forbidden on Shabbos. Therefore, a hammer is what's called keli shemalachto le'isser. Its primary use is for something forbidden. But what happens if I left the hammer on the dining room table and I need the place to serve the Shabbos meal? So halachically I can take it out. What happens if I want to use the hammer to crack open a coconut? To eat, yeah. So you want to crack open a coconut, you want to take a hammer and a screwdriver. Now, a screwdriver is also made for construction, right? So you can't hammer things on a Shabbos. But therefore, you can only move the hammer if you need the place that the hammer is on, or you want to do something permissible with the hammer. But let's say the hammer is outside, you left it outside by mistake, and you're afraid it's going to get stolen, then you cannot bring the hammer in. That's muksa. Same thing with the needle. Even a sewing needle, which is primarily used to sew, right? But what happens if I want to use it to open something or to take out a splinter that's not deep, that I won't for sure bleed? I mean, all these things we learned then also. If you, let's say, or based on what we learned before, einem miskaven, unintentional, but if it's for sure going to happen, then you're not allowed to do it. So, what happens if somebody has a splinter? Now, if the splinter is very deep, a little bit deep, and you're going to take it out, you're going to cause bleeding, right? But I don't want the bleeding. I don't want it to bleed. I want to take out the splinter. So if it's for sure going to bleed, then you're not allowed to take out the splinter. If it's not for sure going to bleed, it might not bleed, and you're not interested in making it bleed, then you would be allowed to take out the splinter on Shabbos. So then you would be able to use a needle, even though a needle primarily is used for sewing. But again, that's all different things that we're going to learn at a different time. Okay, now, what we ended up talking downstairs, Thursday night, we were downstairs. So we were talking about, there is chotzi shiur, half of the amount, and there's what's called chotzi melacha, half of the job. Now, for instance, on Shabbos, it's forbidden to write biblically, and the amount of writing biblically that's punishable by biblical things is 2 letters. So if I write Aleph, Bais, A, B, whatever, doesn't matter, any language, any mark, anything. So I transgress the biblical thing of not writing on Shabbos. What happens if I write 1 letter? So I'm doing the complete writing. I'm just not doing enough. Enough may mean 2 letters. So I'm not doing enough, but I'm doing the whole writing. The whole act of writing is done. So that's biblically forbidden. You don't get punished because punishable is only when you wrote 2 letters. But if somebody writes 1 letter, it's biblically forbidden because of the rule, chotzi shiur osem min haTorah. Like we learned, what happens, the Torah says you're not allowed to eat pig, chazer, right? Now, in order to get lashes for eating chazer, you have to eat a certain amount. So you have to eat a kazayis, which is an ounce. So if somebody eats an ounce of kazayis of chazer, and they were warned and everything, so then they'll get lashes. What happens if they ate half an ounce of chazer? They did a whole act of eating, they just didn't do enough. So then it's biblically forbidden. But what happens if some... No, it's biblically forbidden but not punishable. Well, there's an opinion, the Gemara Reish Lakish holds it's forbidden, but the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan who says it's biblically forbidden. But you don't get punished. So if somebody's going to take a pen and write 1 letter, they did half the amount, so they still is biblically forbidden. But what happens if a certain melacha on Shabbos involves 3 parts to it? Let's say, for instance, on Shabbos you're not allowed to carry from a private domain to a public, not if there's an Erev. This is no Erev. You're not allowed to carry from a public domain to a private domain. Private to public or public to private. You're not allowed to carry, right, unless there's an Erev. Now, what does carrying mean? So carrying halachically has 3 parts to it. You have to pick it up, you have to take it out, and you have to put it down. Those are the three parts that are involved in the malacha of carrying. So what happens if somebody only did 1 and 2 and didn't do 3? Or they did 1 and somebody else did 2 and 3? So then it's not biblically forbidden, because you didn't do half of the amount. You did half of the job, half of the malacha. When you write one letter, you're doing the whole writing. You just didn't do enough. But I'm saying here, the malacha involves 3 steps: picking it up, carrying it out, and putting it down. So for instance, like we discussed Thursday night, what happened? I'm standing inside my house, okay? I take an object, I stick it out the window over the street. Now if I drop it, then I did all 3 parts. I picked it up, I carried it out, and I put it down. What happens though, I pick it up in my house, I stick up my hand out the window, and then somebody else comes and takes it and puts it down. Then it's only rabbinically forbidden. Because I didn't do the whole malacha. I didn't do the whole, like writing. I didn't do the whole carrying. If I carried that much, even by carrying, everything has an amount, how much you need to carry to be chayiv. Okay, and the mission enumerates food and this and that. You know, what happens, let's say for food, let's say it's not, but let's say for food, I need to carry out a kazayas. I need to carry an ounce. What happens if I carry it out a half an ounce? That's half a shear. That would be biblically forbidden. But when I didn't do the whole act of carrying, I only did 1/3 of it to 2/3 of it, I didn't do 3/3 of it, the whole malacha, so then I'm only rabbinically forbidden. What?
You kicked it from one domain to another?
What?
You kicked it,
Kicking is also carrying.
even though you didn't pick it up?
No, picking up doesn't, for instance, if I have something in my pocket, and I walk out, and I stop, even though I didn't pick up, but the fact that I'm standing in a place, and then when I move my foot, I picked it up, I picked up the object together with me. And then when I stop, I put down the object. So kicking would be also throwing, kicking, that's all carrying on Shabbos.
But it doesn't, it's not consistent with your description, picking it up.
But I'm saying picking up doesn't mean when you have something in your pocket.
Not literally.
When you pick up, you have something in your pocket, and you start walking, you picked up the object. Then when you stop, you put it down. What? Because that's the shir that Chum gave, because we learned it out from the Mishkan, and when they numbered the boards in the Mishkan, you know, the boards, the krashim, okay, so they always had to be in this, like you have sukkah boards, you always number them to know what goes where, okay? So let's say in the Mishkan, you have a board. This is a board. And then you have another board in the Mishkan, right? You have 2 boards. Now, how did they know which way where the boards went? So they would write, for instance, Aleph, Bais, Aleph, 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 Bais, Bais, Aleph, Bais, Bais, and then, each board they would number to know which goes next to what. So in the Mishkan, they wrote 2 letters. So because they wrote 2 letters, that's what you learn out from the Mishkan. If over there writing was 2 letters, so writing by us is 2 letters. That's the way, huh?
But if you write the name from Maaseh, 1 letter is considered all right, no?
No, not necessarily. There's a lot of details with that. Okay. The same thing, therefore, it's later. Okay, stop.
Any 10th grade writing is okay, right? On the snow, on the sand.
It's not okay. Stop.